Spoiler warning, we're talking about the thrilling conclusion to the September 2025 Basho and the Yokozuna who came out on top of it all. Here today on the New to Sumo
Let's
podcast.
start the show. New to sumo, here we go.
Even though we had a wild and crazy July where we had four guys who were still in the tournament all the way to the end, there's something about it just being a two-horse race heading into the final weekend that really makes sumo a little bit more fun. What do you think?
I thought this was really the ideal tournament. I've always felt that in sports and certainly in sumo, you want to see the guys at the very top being the ones that are competing the most fiercely, especially at the end. And in sumo, our two Yokozuna that we now are so grateful to have, both competing all the way through the tournament, I think for the first time since they've both been promoted. To see them head to head going into the final day is just amazing. It's what we've been waiting for. We've done thumbnails in the past where we try to pit Onosato versus Hoshoryu as if that's going to be the yusho race, and it didn't work out. But this time, that's exactly what we got. So grateful that we got to see them both still in it on the final day, and that it was really just between the two of them. It's not always going to be like this, and that's for good reason. It's going to be exciting over the next many years to see all these other guys in the Sanyaku and the surrounding area competing against these two at the very top. But it's so nice to see Yokozuna's doing Yokozuna things. And this tournament really it couldn't have ended any better for fans of these two guys.
I mean, there was a scare on day 14 for those who were not aware. Onosato was he was leading the tournament 12 to 1, but he got a freebie win when Ozeki Kodazakura had to bow out with an MCL sprain. Kodazakura is probably going to be out for the next month, but he should be back for November. However, that scared some people a little bit because Hoshoryu was coming off his second loss the day before. So if he had lost on day 14, the tournament would have been over in like one of the most anticlimactic finishes in recent memory. But by hook or by crook, and maybe we'll talk about it later, he got the win on day 14 over Wakatakakage. And then on the final day, we finally had, for the first time in over 15 years, a Yokozuna versus Yokozuna showdown with the championship on the line, and it was epic. We had Hoshoryu getting a surprisingly easy win over Onosato, where he just shoved Onosato forward, and Onosato just seemed to take it and stepped out of the ring. And then that brought up the playoff. And then it seemed like Hoshoryu was about to do it again, but then Onosato showing the sort of growth that he's shown all tournament. His defensive sumo was on top, and for the first time in I think a year, he managed to knock off Hoshoryu spoiler warning, to beat Hoshoryu and win his fifth championship and third in the last four, if you can believe it.
Yeah, I mean, we have been doing this for some time now, the whole Onosato versus Hoshoryu conversation and head-to-head records. We know that Hoshoryu has a bit of an edge, but ultimately Onosato is the top dog in the Banzake. And getting his fifth Yusho certainly confirms that. It would have been quite an interesting story, though, if Onosato had lost it and he was on four and Hoshoryu was on three. I think it would have been a lot easier for people to look at those numbers and say that they're really neck and neck with each other. But for Onosato to win that final match, and everyone was talking about how valuable Hoshoryu's playoff wins were when he was promoted, how important those are in determining how great someone truly is. I think we have to do the same thing for Onosato. We have to talk about the perseverance that it took to win the playoff after having lost the previous match and give him all that credit and say, well, then clearly he's got something that Hoshoryu is still lacking here if we're going to be pitting the two against each other. And now, one of those things is that he has more than double the Yusho wins as Hoshoryu. Now, I don't want to make a big deal about ranking the two as far as who's better as a Yokozuna. I mean, ultimately, the Yusho wins speak for themselves, but most importantly in this tournament, both of them having 13 wins in it was incredible to see. And there was the possibility of someone winning with 14, and then it ended up not working out that way. But it was just really, really refreshing to see two healthy Yokozuna competing like Yokozuna, beating everyone they were supposed to beat, really. Hoshoryu lost only to Aonishki and Kodozakura, both strong Sanyaku guys. And Onosato had his losses against Hakuoho and the other Yokozuna. The Hakuoho loss early on in the tournament was probably the most concerning to anyone who has been recently looking at their records against some of the lower wrestlers. But again, Hakuoho he's a serious competitor. He's in the Joy. Like you're not talking about some rank and filer who's a journeyman. You're talking about a guy who's got Sanyaku potential in Hakuoho. So to have lost that match, I still don't think was really much of an indicator of any weakness on Onosato's part. They both had incredible tournaments.
You're going to find this very funny about that loss to Hakuoho. That is now the fifth time in the last six tournaments that Onosato has lost on day four. For some reason, day four shows up and Onosato just doesn't. He lost. He is just not a fan of like he just has a case of the Wednesdays every seemingly every tournament. Look at that.
That is
He's
actually very strange. So he lost to Abi last November on day four. He had a bad tournament then. He lost to Abi again on day four in this past January. Lost to Wakamoto Haru in March. Then he managed to beat Oho in May, but then lost to Oho in July, and then lost to Hakuoho. Yeah, in this tournament, yeah, you're onto something there. Day four.
yes.
If you're ever in a predicting game, folks, where you have to pick who's going to win on a given day, day four, go with the underdog against Onosato. You might be impressed.
Yeah, but I mean, there really isn't a whole lot that we need to say about Onosato anymore because we've been saying it for what feels like a year and a half now. Simply put, he is the top dog. He's top of the pyramid, head of the table, whatever term you want to use to describe it. He is number one, and there is like, even though there's another Yokozuna and another Yokozuna who has beaten him, about 75% of the time, Onosato is still that dude. And the it seems like the question is, no longer how many championships he's even going to win. It's simply how many he's going to win, every single year, and whether, somebody is going to have a good enough tournament to really challenge him. Like I was not at all like I predicted it very early after he had his struggles in July. Like he's going to overcome them and probably have at least 12 to 13. And sure enough, he is currently averaging 12 wins per tournament over the last four. So, no problems for this guy. He's the top of the pyramid, and and he now has more championships than about one third of all Yokozuna ever.
It's pretty crazy. Well, now we just got to say a little bit more about Hoshoryu, especially because at the start of this tournament and for the majority of it, he was the heavy favorite. He had that undefeated record going into day 12. So, I mean, when you're starting a tournament 11 and 0, you're pretty much the odds of you losing it get extremely low. But when you know Onosato is just waiting there in the wings, one loss behind you, anything is still possible, and you still have each other to face. But Hoshoryu had a tremendous tournament, a lot of different kimarite that he was using all throughout the tournament. And then I guess one moment that's worth mentioning was that he won on a henka against Wakatakakage on day 14. That was
Yeah.
coming off of his two losses. There's really not much to make of that. I mean, henkas happen. It is a strategy. I think it's also different when you're henkaing someone in the Sanyaku who should know better and be able to defend it than to henka against someone that you should definitely be beating anyway, like someone an M10, etc.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it was really just it felt like a desperation move. Like he knew that if he lost that match, that like it would not only be three losses in a row, but he would be forfeiting the championship. Like it was pure desperation mode, which is why he did not bother trying that same maneuver on Onosato the following day. Bad luck for Wakatakakage in that situation, but in fairness, bad luck had already been like his whole story. I think the much more frustrating thing for me was that he lost to Kotozakura the day prior to that. Like there was no excuse for him to lose to Kotozakura, a guy whose number he's pretty much had in recent years when he's been healthy. Um like Kotozakura was clearly injured, withdrew literally the day after. So uh yeah, just he is still subject to those occasional like disappointing moments, which is probably the why there's such it feels like there's such a chasm between him and Onosato overall right now. But we're not quite at the level where the Onosato fans can call it pack watch on all of their haters and start telling us how awful we are for expressing doubts in him. But you guys are getting close. If you're Onosato fans, I mean, if you're Hoshoryu fans right now, you're getting close to being able to diss on all of your haters. Uh, but there is one other person who seems to have his number right now that I think we need to have a serious talk about, and that is the Ukrainian dynamo Aonishki. I think it is very fair to say that he is the number three man in all of sumo right now, and technically speaking, he's going to be the number four next tournament, deservedly so.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
he's 100% going to be an Ozeki, in my opinion. He only needs 11 wins in the next tournament to guarantee it. He has had 11 wins exactly in all of his four tournaments in the Makuuchi division. He seems to just get better and better because as his opposition gets tougher, he continues to perform at the same level and rack up wins against very tough opposition. He beat in this tournament Kotozakura, Kirishima, Takayasu, Wakatakakage, Hakuoho, Hoshoryu, Takanosho, who had a fantastic tournament. He can beat anybody on a given tournament, except Onosato. That's one person he's never had a win against. But to be fair, that's the case for a lot of people. Onishiki, I mean, he's simply like the next best thing, or the next great thing, I guess is probably the best way to phrase that. Oh, there's Onosato, there's Hoshoryu, there's Onishiki, and then there's a bunch of other people who are going to be in and around it for a while. But it seems so obvious to me that Onishiki is going to be one of those guys now permanently for a long time.
yeah, I completely agree. Like, even if he doesn't secure Ozeki next tournament, which is very possible because even Onosato didn't have I believe Onosato had the worst tournament of his career, well, the first time he hit Sekiwake, which Onishiki will be reaching next tournament. Even if he doesn't finish this year as an Ozeki, I don't see how he does not reach Ozeki at some point in his future. And I'm not even all that worried that he isn't like racking up championships the way Onosato did. Like you can look at some other great guys that didn't win their first title until they were already in Ozeki. You can think of Hoshoryu, you can think of Kakuryu, you can think of this little known guy named I think his name was Hakuho or something like that. None of those guys won their first championship until they were well into their Ozeki career. So, just if you're super hyped about Onishiki, just be patient. He is showing that he clearly belongs at the top of the pyramid. He is right up there with Hoshoryu. He's 2-0 against him. Maybe the glass ceiling for him right now is simply figuring out how to beat Onosato, who he is 0-2 against. If he can ever beat Onosato, I think we will officially be ready to start talking about him as a Yokozuna prospect. But for right now, he is very clearly on that Ozeki cusp. Maybe he'll get it his first time. Who knows? I won't be that concerned if he, only has like 8 or 9 wins, or even has like a 6-9 next tournament. Because let's face it, it's tough to crack Ozeki your first time at Sekiwake. But man, this guy is just so fun to watch as a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
Man, he is fun.
Yeah, it's crazy to see who he beats. Each competition, you always know he's gonna beat someone crazy. And in this one, it was practically everybody, with a few exceptions. So very fun to watch the unpredictability that he brings to any match where you think there's a heavy favorite, and pretty soon he's gonna be that heavy favorite in almost every match he's in. Um, finishing out our talk on the Sanyaku guys, I mean, we got to mention Kotozakura, who such a shame that he had to pull out towards the end of the tournament, but again, he got his Kachikoshi. The rules are a little different in terms of what you're really striving for. When once you hit Ozeki, if you know you're not in the yusho race, immediately your mindset is on, well, I just got to get my winning record so that I can maintain my rank. You're not concerned about promotion anymore other than to Yokozuna, which is going to require Yushos. So for Kotozakura, once he got his eight and then ninth wins, he pulled out when he was feeling something, and he ended up giving that Fusen victory to Onosato. But Kotozakura, I mean, he throughout this tournament he looked a lot stronger. Going into day 12, he had was it 8 wins in 11 matches. So I mean, that's way better than what we'd been seeing from him for a while. Maybe he's turned a corner a bit.
Maybe. I mean, certainly the fact that he had to leave the tournament with a clear knee injury, and that was his first time pulling out of a tournament for any reason in 3 years. So, although I will say he did seem to recover very well from that and had, I think, like 2 straight years of winning records after it. So maybe he just needs to finally like get a procedure done on his knee and he'll be right as rain. But I kind of expect that he'll be back to normal next tournament, and I'm hoping that's the case. But yeah, to see him 5-1 after those first 6 days was very appealing. I almost thought that we'd have like a three-way race or a four-way race with most of our Sanyaku guys after then. But then then the middle of the second week came and, people just started falling off. And it devolved into a two-horse race, but in which Kotozakura wasn't really part of. And yeah, I mean he's holding serve. Like he'll probably, do around the same next tournament. So just get well soon as far as that knee goes. The report from Chris Sumo this week is that it should be about a 3-week layoff for him.
Yeah, and overall, he seemed a lot more aggressive this tournament than we've seen recently. So that was also an encouraging sign. He just seems like he has a little bit more energy in his matches, which is it's looking good, looking a little bit better at least. We don't know exactly what his future is going to look like, but it was one of the big questions from our preview video. So nice to see. We have to mention Wakatakakage, such a disappointing situation. His record, while he was on an Ozeki run, his abysmal performance by his own standards certainly basically means now that he needs to restart his entire Ozeki run. Sometimes you could be in a situation where you don't earn the Ozeki promotion this tournament, but you could maybe still be shooting for it next tournament or the one after. Getting a 6-9 record and losing the 12-3 that was 2 tournaments ago pretty much means he's starting from scratch in the next tournament. Because right now he's looking at 17 in 2 tournaments. He would need a 15-0 record to even have a chance next time. It's not happening. He's going to have to basically begin again, and that's really disappointing because he had so much great momentum, especially coming off of that 12-win tournament. I don't know what happened with him. He seemed like he was just caught off guard in so many matches where he didn't realize what they were going to do. He wasn't prepared. It was a very odd thing to witness because he had been fighting with so much swagger, I think, in the last several tournaments since being back up. What do you think happened there?
Yeah, I think it was just the pressure of the moment. Like when he lost to Hakuoho on day one, like my alarm started going off because that was a guy that he had been previously 3-0 against. This was, also a guy that seemed kind of in over his head in Hakuoho at the start, but giving that one up was not great. Beating Oho was okay, but then losing to Tamawashi on day three was when I realized, oh yeah, this simply isn't happening. Because when you lose to those two guys in your first 3 days and you have the entire Sanyaku to go up against, like it was pretty much over by then, and it was really just a question on whether he would retain his rank. And unfortunately, by like day 10, it was really clear that he would be fighting for his life just to hold serve and retain his rank. And man, like it just all fell apart for him. And now he's starting over. I think we have kind of reached a point where we maybe need to accept that that he's 30 now, and he might just have sort of a Sekiwake ceiling at this point. He's going to be 31 at, after the next tournament. He's going to be way closer to, to maybe needing to retire than feeling like he's in the Ozeki hunt, let alone the hunt for another yusho. So I'm hoping that he can bounce back and it was just a nerves thing as opposed to an injury thing, but we'll find out for sure in a few months, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no shame in a Sekewake ceiling. I certainly think he's very possible that he'll be staying around there in that area. Like a lot of the guys that are currently in the Joy and the lower Sanyaku have been just up and down in that area for a long time. So that might be where Wakatakakage stays, but it was seeming like maybe we were going to finally have someone to stand across from Kotozakura, the Ozeki, and now it's looking like that person's going to be Aonishki instead. We don't have time to go through everybody for this tournament, unfortunately. There's a couple other people probably that are worth mentioning, and one that I just got to go to right away is Koto Shoho, our previous yusho winner. I gotta address this point. In our last video, when we were recapping the previous tournament that he won, we were a little bit skeptical of the guy. We were impressed and happy for him that he had won, but we were questioning whether we thought this was really going to be an indicator of future performance. How did Koto Shoho end up doing in the tournament following his Yusho victory that we were slightly surprised about?
3-12.
3-12. Yeah. So that's kind of more so what we were saying. It's amazing to have the title in your pocket, to have won a Yusho, something that most wrestlers will never do or come close to. He's done it. That's fantastic. And he's a Makuuchi wrestler. I mean, he's obviously he's able to beat anybody on his day. He had a win against Wakatakakage. That's a tough one for most people. But realistically, he's probably not a Sanyaku guy. And he'll be back down in the way low Maegashira ranks in the next tournament. But he'll still be up there. So anything's possible. Honestly, I think he might be a great pick next tournament to have a really good one because he'll be underranked most likely based on, the opposition he's beaten before. But yeah, not quite an impressive showing coming off of that U show.
Yeah, and for me, I think the other guy to a lesser extent, Hakuoho. I wasn't really going to touch much on Hakuoho because, it was just a sort of a 50-50 tournament, where he seemed to really alternate winning and losing a lot, struggled a lot against the again, I mean, he was just 50-50 against like the entire Sanyaku, but he still hasn't had a losing record in a tournament where he's fought in all 15 matches, but he did end up with a pretty nasty looking arm injury. Like he could not move that left arm at all by the final few days, and it showed as he lost four of his last six. But he'll be I believe he'll be a Komusubi for the next tournament. So, congratulations for him. That was his goal for the start of the year, and he'll have reached it by the end of it. I just hope he's healthy enough to at least participate in that tournament in his Komusubi debut. The other one I just want to briefly mention is Kusano, our Maegashira 6, who went 8-7. I was very surprised that he seemed to sort of hit his ceiling that quickly. Maybe that was just, some bad training. Maybe he wasn't himself. Maybe he's just and maybe he just struggled to adapt to the tougher competition up there. I have no idea what to expect from him next tournament. Like he still got his Kachikoshi, so he's probably going to be at around like Maegashira 3 or so come the next one, since so many other guys above him are getting demoted. But yeah, just someone to keep an eye on for the next tournament. I truly don't know if he is sort of already at his ceiling or if this was just a bad tournament for him. But yeah, for a guy that like a lot of us have been hyping as the next big thing, I was very surprised that he was only 2-4 after the first 6 days. So yeah,
Hmm.
looking forward to seeing him, you know, potentially improve next time.
Yeah, coming from Isagahama stable, it certainly always seems like if they have someone who's rising quickly, they could easily be the next Yokozuna. But Kusano, I mean, it's hard to say if these are growing pains or him figuring out his level. He's again, he's a Makuuchi wrestler, like that's already very impressive, and he's going to have some great performances in tournaments. Most of his matches, or about half of them, were against people he has never fought before. And he lost a solid amount of those, but as you get to know your opposition, like maybe that helps him. One thing we were saying about Onosato a lot is that he tended to have his worst performances at his highest ever rank, and then he would quickly adapt and learn. So maybe we'll see the same from Kusano as he gets to know this division a little bit better.
Definitely. I guess any other, well, as far as injuries go, Takeru Fuji Armaigashira, 12 and former champion, he missed the entire tournament with an injury. I think he'll be back in November, but even if he is, he'll be all the way down in Jurio, so get well soon. Uh, Happy to report that there really weren't any other, aside from Kotozakura on day 14, no other injuries, thankfully. So, knock on wood that we have way more tournaments where the injuries are, mercifully limited. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, Akuoho had that arm thing, and Daisho still seems to be recovering from his calf injury, which is why he had a 7 and 8.
Oh yeah, that was really surprising. I mean, I think for most people, watching Daisho struggle, especially the way he did in the first half of the tournament with the five straight losses, it seemed like it must be that his injury is still lingering to some extent. I was so grateful to see him, pull it back towards the end there, which made me think it's not something he's going to have to pull out of the tournament for. When he started 1-5, I was thinking, okay, he's just going to pull out of the tournaments, and who knows when he'll be back, and he'll drop down to Juryo, and he did a really good job of recovering. So it must not be too serious, but it definitely seemed like something was hampering him because Daisho doesn't lose those matches normally. Daisho, for the longest time, was right up there with your Kirishima, Wakatakakage, Kotozakura. He was in Ozeki contention for so long. He's always been Mr. Reliable. We used to talk about him in Kachi Clash predictions as someone you can guarantee is going to get 8-9 wins in the Sanyaku, which is the hardest place to do it. So I gotta just think that he's recovering. But hey, let's just hope. I never like to think that someone's aging out and starting to just struggle more. I want to believe that he'll be back to his best soon.
Hope springs eternal in sumo. That's what's so great about us having a new tournament every 2 months.
Yeah.
And we're certainly going to be looking forward to November.
Oh, wait, I think there's someone we missed. Here he comes. He's flying in now. I figured I would do the intro
No,
there.
no, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So Ura had a great tournament, 10 wins. I mean, I can't remember the last time he's done that. I'm just quickly checking. Yeah, he hasn't had a double-digit win tournament in 4 years. So this was a very unusual situation for Ura. Very impressive performances. He really looked like a real serious wrestler in this tournament, which is often not the experience when you
Yeah,
watch
like
him. He gets
what was so crazy about this tournament was I think he only had like one match where he tried to do something funky. Other than that, like most of his wins were extremely straightforward. Just, Oshidashi push out or, just other just very straightforward techniques. Like he didn't try anything funny, which was honestly why I almost forgot about him before we finished our wrap up. But yeah, I mean, 6-1 through the first week, got some wins over guys he'd never even beaten before. Like, very impressive start to the tournament. Things sort of balanced out early in the second week, and he was well out of the tournament, by the final few days. But man, our lovable boy, after having to pull out of the last tournament early with an injury. I was certainly scared that he wouldn't even compete, but for him to
yes.
follow that up with a 10-5, like good on him. He'll be in the Joy next tournament, so
Yeah.
he's definitely going to have to reach way into his bag of tricks to pull out a winning record or just to avoid a worse losing record in the next tournament. But however it is he decides to do it, we'll be watching and rooting for him.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it was a relatively calm, peaceful tournament for Ura, and no crazy bells and whistles to report on, like any new Kimarite that were invented. No major flips that I remember seeing, but just a great performance for him. Really happy for the guy, and most importantly, happy to see that he recovered fine from the injury. So let's see where he goes when he's up in the Joy. I don't know what to expect really, but chances are I'm not picking him for Kachi Clash. I'd be a little scared to do that.
Exactly. All right, I think that's going to wrap up our review of the September 2025 tournament. Once again, spoiler, congratulations to Onosato, our champion, for the fifth time in just 15 tournaments. Still feels weird to say that, and we'll be looking forward to seeing who emerges as our champion in November and finishes up the year.
Yeah, sorry we couldn't get into more today, but we're looking forward to checking in with everybody soon in preparation for the next tournament. Until then, enjoy, savor in Onosato's victory, and we'll see you guys soon.
Take care, everybody.
Bouts and shouts your weekly treat. Every champion you'll meet. Ring the gong, it's time to learn. Sumo tales at every turn. New to Sumo podcast fun.